There's a moment in every physician's life when the story shifts. Welcome to Unscripted, a physician's journey, a space for honest human conversations about the lives you lead behind the white coat. In each episode, you'll meet a physician who has reached a crossroads and found the courage to listen, change, or realign. I'm Lisa Catalano, a clinical social worker and a certified midlife transitions and well-being coach for physicians. I'm honored to welcome you to this conversation. Today, I have the profound privilege to sit down with Dr. Paul Fedak, a heart surgeon, scientist, and academic leader whose career was defined by mastery until everything changed. For decades, Paul lived at the pinnacle of performance, leading surgical teams, advancing cardiac science, training the next generation of physicians. But when chronic pain brought his operating career to a halt, it triggered a deeper unraveling, an identity rupture. That rupture, though painful, became a doorway. Today, Paul's work is no longer about repairing physical hearts in the operating room. It's about tending to the emotional and spiritual hearts of those who give care. He writes, speaks, collaborates on projects that explore suffering, silence, and what it means to heal. Not through fixing, but through feeling, through witnessing, through telling. He's asking the big questions now. What comes after mastery? How do we reclaim purpose, presence, and connection when the performance ends? I personally would like to say that I met Paul through LinkedIn after reading one of his posts, so I strongly urge all viewers to look him up and read some of his posts because they're phenomenal, and I think they're really healing and really honest, and I know they'll help. My hope is that as you listen to this, you will feel a little less alone and maybe a little bit more seen. We're absolutely not here for polish. We're here for truth. So pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee, and let's begin. Paul, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for being here today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, appreciate being invited.
So really excited to have you and really excited to have listeners hear your story because I think it's really compelling. And I think most importantly, what's compelling about it is what you've made out of some of the adversity that you've faced. But maybe we could just start at the very beginning. Can you tell us, was there a specific moment in your life that you can recount that you knew this is what you wanted to do for a living, that you wanted to be a doctor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that when I was a teenager, it's when you're thinking about going to university or college and, you're speaking with your friends and you're trying to figure out, well, who am I going to be, right? You have this sort of identity, but you know that you need to have this professional or work identity. And I think a lot of kids, and I've got kids and I know you have kids and, they're going through that process now. So it's kind of fun to reflect back on it. And then when I think back at that time, I just knew that I wanted to do something that was all about excellence, right? I had a fair bit of loss in my life and in my background, and we may get into some of those things. But I felt like my career, what needed to be about excellence, and it was going to be this thing that nobody could take from me, right? Because I had all these people who came and went in my life, and nothing, felt like my feet were like never on the ground. And I just thought, well, if I really focus on a career that's based in excellence, no one can take it. It'll be uniquely mine and just all mine. It'll be this one thing in the world that I can control and keep. And of course, I think we know where the story is going, but that gives you, the context of sort of where I was coming from. So I was very committed to doing something where I could go all in on it. That would be difficult, that would be a real challenge, that would take maybe a lifelong of mastery to perfect or to get really good at it. But I also wanted it to be something that was meaningful, right? Not just like, okay, I'm going to sell the most grapple grommets and, be the employee of the month. There's nothing wrong with selling. So, salespeople are wonderful people and I work with lots of them. But I wanted it to be like, if I'm going to commit everything I've got to this one thing, it had to have a higher purpose, right? And this is where I think medicine really became a calling for me because I felt like, well, medicine is one of those things that uses every part of you. And it is this incredible skill that you gain over time. And it's universal, right? It's healing. It's making the world a better place. It's rescuing people. It's heroic. And it's something that you could take with you anywhere, right? Whether, I've thought like, okay, if there's a zombie apocalypse, like, my sales skills are probably not going to be great. But if I'm like a doctor, you could go anywhere. You could drop me in the middle of, Africa, and even if they don't have equipment, I could do something to help the people,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And so it really came from that type of aspirational, thoughtful place, and then I didn't really know. Okay, well, what kind of doctor would I be?
Mm,
I wasn't quite sure. I really thought that, well, surgery seemed to have all these heroic type of images, and when you're young, particularly a young man, I think you really
mm,
aspire for that sort of. You want to be the superhero, and you want to wear
yeah.
guys and the mask, and you want to have superpowers, and you want to be recognized for those superpowers, right? And surgeons seem to embrace all of that, and of course it was all about excellence. Like if you don't embrace excellence as a surgeon, the consequences are very overt and they're very real, right?
Mm,
And of all the different surgeries that are out there, cardiac surgery seemed to me the most acute one, right? It was
mm,
so technically demanding, it was so in the moment, it was so raw. And, a millimeter was the difference between life and death. And
yeah.
that really lined up with, right? It aligned very well with what I was hoping for, right? And the
Mm.
kind of mastery that I wanted to pursue.
That's incredible. And, it sounds, there's so much to unpack there. I wish we had more time. But one of the things I'm noticing too in how you've described this is it sounds like with all the losses, right, and all of the heartache or disappointment in your early life, you set yourself very high standards and very high expectations, right? And so I
Yes.
wonder, what was medical school like? So you set these expectations, you had good solid reason for it, and then you start medical school. And I'm wondering how was that? And did you
Yeah.
feel the pressure early on, or yeah,
I absolutely did. So, I mean, getting into medical school is a very tough thing. It's very
yeah,
competitive.
yeah,
And I felt like, okay, amazing. I made it in to medical school. And
yeah.
certainly everybody has a degree of imposter syndrome. And I knew I
Mm,
was smart and I knew I could work hard. And I always thought like I can work much harder than I am smart. And
mhm,
that will get me somewhere, because if I have to, I'll just outwork everybody, right?
mhm,
If that's what it takes to kind
yeah,
of get there. And I was under this philosophy too that like much was given to me, so much would be expected of me. So I put high standards on myself, and I always have. Um, but I was nervous in medical school because right out of the gates, I mean, you look around the room and you're like, well, these are all highly, highly selected people. They're all
right.
straight A students. They've all done these amazing things. And, I really noticed it early in medical school that they seemed to already have this incredible fund of knowledge. Like, the professors would talk about a concept or a term of things I'd never heard of, because, like, how would I have heard of them?
Right.
Like, I didn't have any doctors in the family. I didn't grow up doing that kind of stuff. I did a bit of medical research. So when certain topics came up, I knew something about them, and I felt really,
Mm.
oh God, I know about this. Thank God. I'm not like behind everyone else. But like the people would put up their hand and ask these questions. I was like, how do you already know all this, right? Like I thought, aren't we just all learning it for the first time? So I really felt like I was always behind, right, in medical
Mhm.
school. I felt like I was always kind of just catching up and not really in the groove of everybody else. But it's quite possible that everybody felt that way. I don't know. There's a
Pretty
good chance.
sure.
Yeah, there's a good
Yeah,
chance we all felt the same way.
yeah,
But it was an amazing time because
yeah.
as medical students, I felt like during medical school it maybe felt a little less competitive. Like we were all on this really unique journey, and we all knew it was going to be hard, and we were going to be tested to our limits. So we were going through something almost traumatic together. So there was
Mhm.
very quite a tight bond between all of us, and work in these small groups, and we'd be learning how to do things for the first time together and fumbling around, and it was a lot of fun, and it was very there was a great generosity of spirit amongst the different students, and we made some lifelong friendships, which was really, really a wonderful time. And then that seemed to change later,
Mm.
like when you get later in your career, we didn't seem to have that bond. And it wasn't until I, went through my own issues and then actually went to a mindfulness retreat for physicians,
Mm.
where it was other physicians who were kind of burned out and who were disenchanted. And the amazing thing about that retreat was that it felt like medical school again. It felt like it was like colleagues and peers, that we all respected each other, but we were also fighting a little bit of the unknown, and we were
Mhm.
sort of fighting it together, and we were trying to work through it and help each other. And it was really a nice coming home
Mhm.
to bond with colleagues in that way, which I hadn't been able to do in a really long time.
Paul, I wonder, what do you think happened in that in between period? So, post medical school, when you started your career, and then that retreat. What do you think shifted in the culture, in the community, in your relationships?
Yeah, I mean, that's a profound question, and I don't know that I have all the answers. It's
Hmm.
something changed, something changes once you actually go into practice. I mean,
Hmm.
I think it also changes in residency. Like medical school is this sort of bubble, right? It's this
Hmm.
closed biosphere, right? Where you have all these sort of wise people that are manipulating your world. It's like a Pleasantville, right? It's just totally artificial. And it's nice in a way, and I think it's necessary to create that sort of bubble to train people in the right way and to have them aligned on the right values and that sort of thing. But then there's the harsh reality, like you get pulled out of that and then you become a resident, and you start to see this when you do what we call clerkship. When you start rotating in the
Hmm.
hospital, you're still protected because you're a medical student, but you start to get this feel of like, okay, there's this sort of harsh reality of what's happening in the clinical world and in the hospital, especially in these big acute care hospitals where you do your training, and you feel very swallowed up and a bit lost in it. And the pace is very intense. So here you are learning how to take this very careful history and physical exam from a patient, and learning how to like set the whole mood and drape the patient perfectly. And then you go on your rotation, you see like no one does that, right? Like nobody's doing any of that stuff. They're racing around like maniacs trying to like, you know, juggle a million balls at the same time. And it's this harsh reality. And then I think in residency, you have to just drop all of that stuff from medical school, that false sense of security, and then you're right in the action. And it's really difficult because yes, you go to medical school and you learn the language of medicine, but you don't actually learn any real practical skills. Like you know which way to put your stethoscope on, but you don't really, master what you're listening to or anything like that. It's in residency that you actually gain the skills to be a doctor and to do what doctors do. And it's a rough climb really to get there. And particularly, I think in surgery, it's particularly rough because you do have to learn this surgical skill, and it comes with a cost, right? If you don't do it right, especially in cardiac surgery, you don't do a simple thing right, you can hurt somebody really bad. So it's a difficult learning curve, right? And it's a harsh environment, and I think you just have to like toughen up, right? You just get
There
tough,
you go.
and you start to get numb. And in surgical training, even physically, you have to be well. First, you have to be physically fit and have the stamina to do it for in these long cases. But you also have to be able to turn off your body, right? It's like, okay, you don't
Hmm.
feel that day. Oh well, like you got to go do your thing, right? And you can't predict how long you might be in there for. An hour, you might be in there for 8 hours. There's no washroom break. There's no scratching your nose. There's no, oh, I'm hungry, I need a sip of water. You just got to focus and get the job done. So you just learn how to shut it all down, right? So you shut your physical body down, and then you shut your emotional body down too, because you are thrown in these situations where, people like suffer and they die, and, mistakes are made and things are not done perfectly. And there are bad outcomes. Even when things are done perfectly, there are bad outcomes and some horrible, horrible situations that you're a part of, right? Like you've got your hands in there. So you feel this real connection to what's happening, and it can be really tough. So there's this numbing process that happens, and there's a competitiveness at this
Mm.
point because now you're not protected, And that
Mm-hmm.
increases over time as well, because you're still competing to get the coveted residency position, then the coveted senior residency spot, chief resident, or the coveted fellowship position, and the coveted job. The once you have the job, you have to get the right cases, and it's just never ending, right? And you start to wall yourself off, and you start to become quite isolated.
I think in just that short blurb, I think, and your experience as a whole, patients have no clue what, not, and they shouldn't. I mean, I know they're in crisis, but they have no clue what you go through and the expectations and demands that not only patients and families have, which I totally understand they should, right? They're sick and they're in need. And that's what you're there for. But then also the institution as a whole and what they expect of you, your colleagues and peers, what you've actually trained your mind to think it needs to do, your body needs to do, your heart needs to do. And after a while, I think what you've described is this like loss of self, right?
Hmm.
And it sounds like that retreat was you said this beautifully. And this is like my catchphrase too, is the coming home. It's the reclaiming that. Do you remember the very, very first patient that you had where you were the attending, the surgeon of record?
So I do remember, yes, so I do remember the first patient I operated on as the lead
You're
physician,
it.
as
Yeah.
what we call the most responsible doctor,
Okay.
MRP, where it's my name on the chart, it's my name on the wristband, and it's my ass on the line if things don't go well,
Right.
right? So I do remember doing
Yeah.
that first case, and holy crap, I couldn't believe that the patient survived. I really just, you know, which you shouldn't think, because like you
Yeah.
do this for so long, for so many hours, for so many years, but you kind of like never know for sure, right? It's
Right.
like, this is one of the funny things about becoming a surgeon is like, you don't really know, can you do it completely on your own without
Mm-hmm.
another master surgeon in there kind of directing or being able to ask questions? You don't really get a chance to do that until you go into practice.
Mm-hmm.
So the first case you do is very much that way. It's kind of like, can I really do this? I mean, and you kind of know you can, but there's part of you that's like, I've never proven it yet. So here we go, right? And I did the case, everything went fine, and
Yeah.
of course, like, I didn't really want to leave the hospital that night because I was scared that something would happen. And of course, I raced in first thing in the morning and checked on the patient, and everything was fine, and it was the most wonderful feeling to think like, oh my God, I really can do this. And this person is better because of what I've learned and what I've spent all this time and all the sacrifices I made. I can really do this. And then it was exciting to be like, okay, I can do it. Now I want to get great at it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then you
Great.
focus, then you're on another, right? It's
Right.
another climb up the mountain,
Yeah.
because it's like, now I'm going to spend the next 10 years to master this.
In your residency and you talked about the beginning process of walling off and kind of the competitive nature of your subspecialty or specialty. Then you had your first patient. You're now an attending. You had your first patient. Your name is on the wristband and on the board, and your ass is on the line. When did you notice the a deeper shift or a deeper kind of disconnection from self? Maybe.
Well, I think the thing is you don't notice it. I mean, I think
Mm,
if you could notice it, it's probably not happening, right?
okay.
Like
Yeah.
it's like you become the thing that you're doing, and you start to lose the concept of who you were before. And I think this is one of the problems with something like cardiac surgery and many medical specialties. They are so immersive. Like, you have to completely immerse yourself in them,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so easy to lose your identity because it's all you do, right? It's like, it's all you, like, even when you're not in the hospital, like, I'd be thinking about the case I was going to do, or, and I also do research, and I ran a research lab. So I was always, my head was always in the game. And I'm sure that there were times when it drove my wife crazy and my family crazy, because I just kind of wasn't present sometimes, right? I'm like off thinking about, all these other things, which was fun for me because I was all in, and I was still in this sort of achievement mode, right? Of like,
Mm-hmm.
and it was still just all very much about me. It was kind of a selfish act, right? Like, even though I'm saving people's lives and I'm using excellence to save their lives, the focus of the excellence was more about my personal development, my personal skills. And it wasn't until later in my career that I was actually able to look up a little bit and be like, okay, I've now mastered doing this technically, and I've done all these things, and it's great. But I kind of like took a breath and looked up and like, oh, like, okay, what's this all about? I got lost in it
Mm-hmm.
myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I started. It was only later in my career that I started to really think even more about the patient. It's not that I was terrible to patients, but I was doing it as a personal challenge, right? Not as, this is my gift to you as another human being to fix your heart and heal you. I did the fixing, but not the healing, which means I didn't have this sort of time and bandwidth to really sit with a patient and be present and really listen to their story. I was a busy guy on the move, right? And I was traveling and I was lecturing, and you know, there I was giving a keynote
Yeah.
address in Monaco, and then sipping wine with the Prince of Monaco. Like, it was glamorous and it was exciting, and it was about me, right?
Right.
And once I kind of looked up, I started to think about the patients a little bit more and like their journey, and trying to be a better doctor and a better person by stepping a little bit outside of that identity. But the interesting thing about that was it got harder. All of a sudden, doing surgery was way harder when you really start to bond with the patient, you connect with them on an emotional and spiritual level. And then it became more about the human experience, and my experience became difficult. And I think there are people who write and talk about this in the sense of, you have to be in that space to be human, but you can't stay there very long as a doctor because it makes your job impossible, especially if you're dealing with life and death stuff, right? Like, if I'm sitting there with an open chest and I stop your heart and I'm holding your heart in my hands and I'm thinking about you as the person and that sort of thing, you can lose your way, right? You can get the jitters, and
Mm-hmm.
you can lose your focus. And this is why we don't operate on family members and
Mm-hmm.
friends, because like it's too close. So there is a sort of wall you kind of have to make to be able to be objective and intervene in this way, to be able to put your hands in somebody's body, right? And take their life in your hands. So I think there's this funny paradoxical balance that needs to be made. And I know patients really want their surgeon to have this deep connection and they want to get to know them. But at the same time, the surgeon needs a little bit of distance
Mm-hmm.
to be able to emotionally process and handle this. But what if you could? I mean, that was the thing. I was like, to me, my next challenge was, well, what if I could balance both, or what if I could do both those things? What if I could be very present for my patients, um, and still be technically excellent? And that was, to me, the next challenge. And I was working on that, and I was making some progress with that. And then the wheels fell off, right?
Well, I think you're also talking about self-preservation, right? The need for self-preservation. It's not even just in the moment, I would imagine, that you're holding this patient's heart in your hand and you're thinking about who loves them and who's waiting for them, at the end of this, right? It's also, you close the patient, they're in recovery, and then you've got to go do the next thing. Like, your day
Oh
is
yeah,
not over. You've got to shift your mind to,
yeah.
maybe giving bad news or
When you're in the OR doing the case, you're in the moment and you're
right.
very much in control. Like, you control the environment, you control what's happening, you control the oxygen levels, the heartbeat, you're absolutely in control of everything. When you leave the OR, you are no longer in control. And now
Yeah.
somebody else is managing your patient in the ICU, or you're not there at the bedside. You have much less control. Now you're like, okay, we say we make the cut and God heals it, right? Like, it's out of your hands at that point with the next step. But it is really, there's a lot of tricky things. Like, I'll give you an example. There was one case I had where it really threw me, and it was, I think, a good example of this kind of, you don't want to get too close. Before I was operating on this elderly gentleman, he, before his surgery, he said, "Oh, look, I've got something. I got a letter for you." I'm like, "Oh," I thought maybe it was a personal directive or like, "Hey, what to do after my
Mm.
surgery? Don't tell this person this, whatever." So I open it, and it was like done in crayon, and it was from his grandson
Oh.
staying, writing me a personal letter about how much he loves his grandfather, and he hopes everything will go well with the surgery. And I was like, "Oh my god,
Oh my God. I can't even
couldn't you have given
imagine.
me that like after the surgery?" So like I actually brought it home and I showed my kids and my family. I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm like so nervous now about operating on this because I'm going to be thinking about this like 6 year old little boy worried about his grandpa, and I'm the one who will make the difference whether he sees that his grandfather ever again." And there's the weight of that, right? Like it,
Sure.
if you go too deep in that, the weight of it will just crush you and you won't be able to do it.
How did you handle that? How did you end up navigating the feelings that get stirred up, right, from that note? You had to go operate on him. So how did you navigate through
Yeah,
that?
you suppress it. So,
Okay. Yeah.
throughout my life, I've been pretty good at suppressing emotions, as many men particularly
Yeah.
are good at.
Yeah.
So, it was
Yeah.
I learned how to just suppress everything, which is pragmatic and is functional and allows you to do extraordinary things, but it comes at a cost.
Hmm.
And there is a reckoning at some point if you suppress all of your emotions.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because there's a parallel process that's happening. So you're striving for excellence. You're in your career. You're doing the thing that, um, you're living your why, basically, right?
Yeah.
How do you then? You also have a personal life, right?
Hmm.
You're interested in partnering with someone. You maybe want to have a family. So how, when you are needing to emotionally shut down for that, how do you then build this personal life? How does that impact your personal life? Or how did it for you, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was fortunate. I got married in residency, um, and had kids during residency.
Mm.
So I already had an established relationship, established family. My wife was a corporate lawyer, but once I went
Mm.
into practice, she stayed home. We had a third child, and she stayed home and managed the house and the kids, which helped a lot, right? Because it's not like, because my schedule was really crazy.
Mm.
So I knew that my family was stable and safe. And I had gone through as a kid, like my mother was married 6 or 7 times. I kind of lost track. My dad was married 3 times. So I was like, okay, if I'm ever going to get married, I'm not getting divorced. This is like not happening.
This
Like,
is it. Yeah.
well, and if it won't be my fault, let me put it that way. I'm going to be all in on this, and like I'm going to make this work. So it was really important to me to have a stable family life and to be there for my kids. And I always felt that I balanced it quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I balanced it from a time perspective well. I don't know that I balanced it from an emotional presence perspective as well as I
Mm-hmm.
could have, right? Like I just wasn't always there and present as much as I'd like to. And of course, you have to make sacrifices. I needed to travel for work. I needed to be on call and work nights and
Right.
weekends. But I'm one of the lucky ones because we'll have our 25th wedding anniversary
Yay.
in September, and I'm just lucky that we were able to keep it together, right? And in some ways, what has happened to me now, not being able to operate, is a little bit of a gift from that point of view. Is that like I'm more present now, and I'm home more, and I'm just more attuned to the daily activities that are happening here, and working from home a little bit more, is so different because you understand the rhythms of what's happening with your family. Like I know now what my kids are doing every day and where they're off to and what what's going on in their heads. I know it. I'm sure still not as well as my wife does, but but I at least know some of it. Whereas
Yeah.
before, I probably knew none of it.
You talked about, so I'm going to jump back for a second. You talked about this idea of looking up, that when I'd asked you the question about when did you notice the shift in terms of the walling off, and you
Yeah.
said, well, people don't, right? Because if they did, they wouldn't be walling off.
Right.
And then you talked about this period of time where you looked up. I love that. Do you remember the moment that you realized, look up, buddy, it's time?
Yeah, I don't know exactly when it was, but it was later, definitely later in my career, once I felt like, certainly past that first 10 years where you're
Yeah.
developing that expertise and mastery. And I think it was when I started getting really, really comfortable with every kind of cardiac surgical case, and I was very confident about outcomes and that I could pull people through. That I think it was at that point that I kind of looked up more, and I was like, I need to like connect with my patients more and make their journey better. And I could see how much anxiety they had, and I was like, I want to be with them on this journey, and I want them to, they know, I know I'll give them technical excellence, but they don't see that part,
Hmm.
they see the scar, but they don't know all the details. What they see is the time you're with them at the beginning and when you're coaching them through what they're going to go through, and they see you after the surgery when, and they can count on you and in follow up. And I wanted to make the doctor patient relationship better, right? Because like I said, I was fixing hearts, but I wasn't healing people. And then I felt like, well, what if I could maybe do both? And certainly when I started thinking that way, my relationship with my job improved in the sense of I loved it more. As much as I
Yeah.
loved doing technical surgery, it just felt like much richer. There were just more degrees of freedom. There, it was more vivid. It was more rewarding, and it was about more about why you become a doctor in the first place, right? Of you kind of envision as a medical student, you're going to get to know this patient, and they're going to, respect you and count on you and trust you, and you're going to work with them closely, and you will cure them or help them, and there'll be this sort of celebration at the end and a special moment that you carry with you. And we're losing that. We're losing that in current medical practice, and
Yeah.
it can be that way. And part of the way it can be that way is if you allow it to be, right? If you pick up on these little things, these nuances, and you're present for your patients and you spend that time. It's a relationship like any relationship. And once I started doing that, I just found it so rewarding. Like I just started to get to know my patients so much better, and they opened up to me more about their fears, and I helped them kind of get through this difficult journey, and I could just feel the love back, right, from them. And so it was wonderful. And then it wasn't like a job, it wasn't scary, it wasn't concerning, it wasn't anxiety ridden. It was much more a mutual relationship and a healing journey. And it was wonderful. And I was like, okay, I want to do more of that. And then I couldn't.
I want to get there. And what's really interesting is it sounds like when you put more heart into your work, more emotion in your work, the anxiety stopped, right? The burnout slowly improved, right? And there was meaning and purpose back in your work. And I think that's the thing. I was going to ask you, what's the one ingredient, right? Because if someone's watching this and they are struggling with exactly what you were struggling with back then, what would be the one or two things that you would suggest that they do or that would help? So it
Yeah.
sounds like being in touch with your emotions is one, but how did you get there?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say exactly. I mean, I think one of the big challenges for people is that they're stuck in the machine, and it's very difficult to practice in the way that you want to practice. Your idealized notion of how to practice is very restricted by the medical industrial complex, your
Right.
colleagues, expectations of patients, the way you're reimbursed.
Right.
So I think what people need to do though is take a step back and figure out what is the most important part of their practice. How do they want to practice, and to make sure you're making fundamental changes to get there. That might require changing the nature of your practice, like you do this kind of stuff but not that kind of stuff. It might
Mm-hmm.
mean making less money because you say, okay, I can't be on call this much. I'm not going to see 40 patients in my clinic, I'm going to see 20. So you make half the money, but you get to practice the way that you want to practice, right? Or it might mean leaving that hospital or that clinic and joining a different practice with different colleagues. It might mean standing up for yourself more, because your colleagues are saying, no, you can't do that. You have to do it this way, or we all do it this way. You have to do it that way too. It might mean turning off the noise and just being true to yourself and who you are and not listening to what other people have to say. I had to do a little bit of that myself, right? Where
It's hard.
did open a specialty clinic and my colleagues were like, well, surgeons don't spend time in clinic. What are you doing? That we don't value that.
Mhm.
Do cases and be on call. That's the work, right? This other stuff you're doing, we don't care about that. And they didn't really care about my research either, but I always has been committed to those things. So you have to fight for what you believe in, but I think you got to listen to your heart. You got to listen to what really is calling you inside and follow that, right? Because there are so many other incentives telling you to do something different and so many financial demands and practice demands. So you have to create the conditions for your own success, I like to say. I think that's really important. You got to know who you are, and the older you get, I also think the more you need to live true to your values. And I think that is where the crisis comes from, is as you get older. When you're young, you can kind of adapt, and you're sort of you're in this achiever mode where you're just being compliant and you want to get along with everybody and you just want to follow the rules. You want people to like you, so you're very
Mhm.
compliant and complicit to what's happening. And then as you get older, you get a little more cantankerous because you feel this urge to follow your truth and your values, right? And I think you have to do that. So in terms of the burnout, there's a wonderful poet and philosopher and writer that I like to read named David White, and he
Mhm.
talks about burnout, and he says that burnout is not working too hard.
Mhm.
Burnout is, the recipe to burnout is wholeheartedness, is just having your whole heart into something. And and I think to me, that's living your values and doing work that aligns with your values. And if you do that, you just would never burn out. And doctors do not have a problem with working hard. They would not have become doctors if they
Right.
didn't have an incredible capacity to work hard. So it's not that you're working too hard. It's that you're not wholehearted, because there's pieces of what you're doing that are creating moral injury or are not aligning with your truest values, and you have to make a change.
And I would argue it's not about becoming cantankerous in your midlife, it's about becoming wiser.
Well, that's a nicer way to put it.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm
No.
it feels like I'm cantankerous
No.
because, and I think the way it feels that way because I am speaking up more and I am standing
Yes.
up for values, and I'm not the nice guy that just got along with everybody, because I used to be that guy because I just wanted to fit in and I just wanted to be the golden boy and please everybody. So I didn't speak up for my true values. But as I've gotten older, I started to. So it feels like I'm cantankerous because I didn't used to be that way. But I think you're right. I think it does come from wisdom. It does come from what I say is that, right? I held hearts, I fixed hearts, and now I speak from the heart. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to stay true to my own values and vocalizing them.
But bring us to now. Um, share
Oh,
with
gotta
us then.
go. Sorry. No, just kidding.
Don't do that to me. It took me 10 minutes to spit the question out. Don't leave me now.
Okay, yeah. So for the people listening, we're like, what's this guy talking about? So well, let me back up even further. In about 5 or 6 years ago, I wanted the next challenge. I was still chasing excellence, and
Mhm.
I went into leadership. So I went and did a year-long training in Boston for surgical leadership,
Oh,
and I became the head of our department and the director of our heart institute. It's a big leadership position here. And that was great. It was exciting. It was a new challenge. More chances to be excellent. But COVID hit, right, and it was extremely challenging. So I was in charge of four big acute care hospitals, all of cardiovascular
oh my God.
services around the big city of catchment area of 2 to 3 million people, and it was just this, I call it the Super Bowl of hospital administration, right? It was just like the biggest challenge we've ever seen, this pandemic. So I was thrown in the deep end in leadership. It was very difficult. I had a friend who was also in leadership. He was head of the Department of Surgery. He's a thoracic surgeon. He's about 6 years older than me. And we confided in each other a lot. We had a lot, we were trying to live our values and trying to fight for the right things. And the healthcare system was not very responsive to us. And he was very vocal in meetings. He would speak up. And I learned from him how to be more courageous and more vocal. And he ended up quitting his leadership position. And I followed soon after because he sort of made it, he was courageous and made it okay for me. Um, but then wasn't long after that I opened an email and there he was in full color picture. It looked like he was being profiled and celebrated for something, and I read it and I didn't see what the award was, and then I realized it had his birthday and that day, and it was his obituary. So he committed suicide, and this is what's now inspired me to speak more about this because it really hit me hard because I really saw a lot of myself in him. And soon after that happened, I started getting this back pain that just relentless, that wouldn't go away. And of course, the story, but the people listening don't, is that back pain got relentless. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep. I was canceling surgeries, but I just never asked for any help, and I just couldn't seem to tell anybody about it. I was afraid to tell anybody that I had a physical problem. I was afraid to tell anybody that I couldn't sleep. I was afraid to tell anybody that I had this horrible pain because you don't want to lose the trust of your team. You don't want to lose the trust of patients. You don't want to get in trouble with the authorities that manage your licensing and all that stuff. So I just kept going and going and going until finally it got so bad that my hand seized when I was in the middle of doing an open heart surgery, and I had to get another surgeon to come in and rescue the patient because I couldn't finish it. And that was the last surgery I ever did 2 years ago. 2 weeks after that, I was in an operating room getting surgery on my neck for a nerve root compression. And unfortunately, there's chronic damage, and I haven't been able to go back to surgery. So with all of that stuff going on and some other things, you can imagine that I started slipping, right? And as I say it, I didn't burn out. I broke apart. I mean, I just unraveled and I got clinically depressed, and I came pretty close. I was thinking about Sean a lot, and I just kept thinking to myself, I don't want him to be alone anymore. I'm going to go be with him. And it was a friend of mine who was a friend of Sean's too, who was the head of the Department of Psychiatry, and she picked up on it. She had called me about something, and I said just off the cuff that I was thinking a lot about Sean. And then she phoned me, and she could tell that I wasn't good, and she got me help. And, who knows, maybe I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for that. So the message being that if you speak up, there's help out there, right? And I think the stigma is that we're also proud, and there's so much stigma around it that we don't want to ask for help, right? We have to wear this mask and this identity that we're unbreakable. And I think for me, the learning and the message is that we got to speak up. We got to speak about our pain. We have to drop the mask. And, I came close, right? I came close to that. And I feel bad for Sean that, I wish he had spoken up. I don't know if he ever did. He certainly didn't to me. None of my colleagues, we never saw it. We didn't pick up on it. I was fortunate that someone picked it up on me. But we're losing people, and it's not just Sean. There's many others, right? We had two other surgeons in our health system that did the same thing in the last few years, and there's many more. And I think there's a lot more depression, and there's a lot more chronic pain. There's probably a lot more addiction than we can appreciate. And you could blame, I think the public looks at it as well, these doctors, these high paid doctors, if they can't handle it, get out of the kitchen and all this stuff. I don't think that's the place to take this. I mean, I honestly think we need compassion for everybody, right? The public needs compassion for doctors so that they can be whole and have compassion for patients. And it's gotten to this point where it's like no one has compassion for anybody anymore. So I don't know. I'm not sure what we're doing exactly, but I don't like it. And to me, I said I'd go into leadership, and I feel like thought leadership and speaking up on these issues is the best leadership that it's the best leader I can be, right? And I'm finding that by writing about it, I can get people in the heart a little bit more, because the facts and figures, people know them. They're not they're not changing anything, right? It's just like everyone knows don't smoke. It's right there on the package, right? There's like, at least in Canada, there's like a picture of like a dead lung on a cigarette package. So it's like, you know this is bad, but you're still, it doesn't change your
You're doing
behavior.
it.
But if you hit somebody in the heart, right, you send that arrow through and they feel something, that can change their behavior. And that's why I'm trying to write about these things. I'm trying to get people to feel something, to get rid of the numbness, and hopefully that will create some kind of change in the system.
I had really good friend who's a surgeon, and he said to me the other day, "I'm afraid to feel."
Yeah,
And I thought,
yeah.
I didn't even know what to say in response to that. But
And I think there's this idea that, well, surgeons don't have feelings. They're just these weird
um,
robotic people that are just super driven and they're brilliant technically, but they have no feelings. I don't think that's true. I really don't. I mean, I know tons of surgeons, they're good people, right? These are people that if you phone them, doesn't matter what they were doing, if you needed them, they would drop it and they'd come help you, right? These are good people. And it's just the nature of what we're asking them to do, I think changes them. And I think it's the same in other professions. If somebody, you train somebody to be like a, um, you know, a UFC fighter, right? So
mhm.
all they know is violence. Like they train in violence all the time, and then they're out in the supermarket and they get mad and they punch somebody, and then we vilify them. It's like, yeah, but this is what this
This is what
person,
they do.
like, obviously they need to have limits and they need, but you kind of have to have a bit of compassion for people who are trained in a certain way, and then when they sort of lack that skill in the right moment, I mean, to me, it's a bit it's understandable.
So it's learning to feel or to go to the heart space, right? It's having boundaries also, right? So
Hmm.
that UFC fighter goes to the store and he wants to punch something. It's like where you have to self-regulate that. He has to learn boundaries, like where this is okay to do it here, but it isn't okay to do it there. And then it's also being able to ask for help. So it sounds like those three things.
Yeah. It's like, well, my job's hard and people don't understand, and they throw scalpel blades in the OR and they scream at everybody. No, that's no good. And you can't do that. But is it understandable sometimes? Yes, right? It doesn't mean they're a bad
Yes,
person. They're
100%.
in a pressure cooker, but we have to train them. We have to give them space and we have to train them. And that's where I think coaches like yourself can be really, really important. And I personally believe that every physician should have a coach. I mean, I think anybody in a high profile job that's stressful probably should have an executive coach to help them unpack things, to help them deal with their emotional and behavioral issues, because we all have them. Some of us hide it better than others, but they're all there.
So I want to just thank you for the vulnerability and for the honesty that you shared something pretty personal and pretty significant, and I don't want to kind of gloss over that either. And I can't imagine what that period of time was for you, especially because I'm thinking back to what you'd first said in the beginning of our conversation about how, this career, this choice of profession for you was very much about it's something that no one can take from you, right? It's about excellence. It's about striving to be the very best version of yourself for the other, for, to heal, to so I can't even imagine that sort of double whammy for you, for lack of a better word,
Yeah, it's a good
which
one.
I'm at a loss for words, Paul. I think
Yeah.
that's what it is, which is unusual
No,
for me, but
I hear you, and I mean,
yeah,
I think that's why I brought it up, because
yeah,
it really was. I think it's one of the reasons why it hit me harder than maybe
mm,
some, because on the face of it, it's like, okay, well, I can't do clinical heart surgery anymore, but I can still see patients in clinic. I can still do my research, which is a big part of my life. I do a bunch of consulting work with biotech companies.
mhm.
I can still do all that stuff. I've got a wife and kids, and otherwise I'm healthy, and I've had a very successful career, and I'm financially stable. There are so many good things, right? So why would somebody fall apart when they can't do
Hmm.
this one little thing? Because I carried with it, it carried an identity, right?
There you
For
go.
me, and that's what I'm trying to really talk about too, is the identity piece, because I think that we get really lost in our role as physicians and the identity of a physician, particularly surgeons, and that makes the burnout more. And I think it creates a different type of psychology that we have to appreciate if we want to kind of improve and become more balanced and become healthier. And for me, it was a real shock because I truly believed that, like, that was the one thing I had control over. But of course, that's the way life works, right? You know, man makes plans, God laughs, right? I
Laughs,
mean,
yeah.
I think the thing that you hold on to, the thing you covet the most, you will be challenged in your life, and it will come from somewhere that you never predict or never plan on. And that's when the rubber meets the road and you really get hit with something. So, as stressful and terrible as that sounds, it's also your biggest opportunity for growth. It's really
Mm.
where the tensions are. That's where the innovation lies. And I say that in the biotech startup world all the time, but it's also true on a personal level, right? When you're challenged, when your ego and identity are the most challenged, that's when you have the biggest emotional response. That's when you suffer the most. And it's also through that suffering and through that pain that you can find the greatest revelation about who you really are and what you're all about. And if you can come out of that fire and those ashes reborn, um, I think you find a different wisdom and a different peace in the world. And I kind of feel in many ways that that's what I've found through all of this, right? I've come out the other side with, I still grieve the loss about not being able to do clinical heart surgery. I'll always grieve that loss, but I'm not crippled by it, right?
Mhm.
And I have found a voice now about things, and a platform that I otherwise would never have had. And I've had so many people come to me and say, "You're going to save more lives by talking about the things you're saying and doing now, and telling your story from this place of vulnerability, because it is rare for somebody like me to do that. That if I continue with that, I will save more lives than I ever would if I kept operating." And that makes me pretty happy.
I had a client call yesterday or a couple of days ago with a neurosurgeon, and I couldn't get past what he did. Right, his whole identity is wrapped up in the fact that he's a neurosurgeon. And I am sitting here with you as a cardiac surgeon, and I feel like I'm talking to Paul, just a person with this incredible resume and this. I mean, I'm in awe that your hands were in someone's heart, not just someone's, but probably hundreds of thousands of people's of hearts, right? And yet I
Yeah.
feel like I'm talking to the man. How do you grieve the loss of the work that you used to do? And is it grieving the loss of not operating anymore? Or is it grieving the choice, the loss of choice?
I think it's both. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that many surgeons get to a point with aging where they have to think about retirement, and that's a
Hmm.
huge issue. Like, it's massive
Oh,
for
I
surgeons,
know.
right? And maybe you coach some of them, or you've
Yeah.
seen it, or you've lived it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. All of the
Maybe
above.
you lived it. Okay, all of it. Checked all the
All of it.
boxes.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, but there's no question that, like, that's a difficult one because you have to choose. And as they say, right, you can't retire a day too early, but you can retire a day too late. And I think the biggest fear for many surgeons is not having the insight to know that you've lost a little bit and maybe it's time to hang it up. And
Mhm.
you don't want to have to wait until somebody else shuts you down, right? Or you hurt people, God forbid, before you stop. And that's where the tension between this identity piece and the reality really are combustible, right? And we certainly see that. In my situation, it was different because it was imposed on me. So, and I don't know which was better or worse. I mean, I think
Right.
they're both hard. But for me, I was cut short too early. Like I was 50 when it happened, and I felt like, okay, well, I'm just getting good at this, and now the rug's being pulled out from under me. So because I didn't get to choose it, it felt hard for me. And yeah, I think that factor plays into it. And I'll always grieve it because it's such a special thing. I mean, I just spent
Mm.
most of my life focused on that and trying to be good at it and making so many sacrifices. And it really is so special when you do it well and you're with your team. I know everybody else feels it too, right? There's just something that's not replaceable in any other kind of job. I mean, I think maybe the only, like what I'm finding now, the only thing that gives me that same kind of gift is writing, right? I'm finding with
Mm.
writing,
Yeah.
I feel inspired again. And there's something, I don't know, it's something about creation. Like when you do surgery, you're creating something with your hands, right? And it's a beautiful gift for the other person because what you create is going to make them live longer, feel better, and give them their life back. And of course, that's it. That's why you do all this, right? So not being able to do that, but if I can reach people's hearts, maybe not through the open chest, but through writing words, that may be a close second. So that's where I'm focused right now.
I'm just going to say it's less gory that way too.
It is, and I don't have to be up all night, and I don't.
Right, I'm
No
sorry.
one's gonna die.
Yeah.
There's not so many expectations. It's certainly, and it's something that I can do like the rest of my life. I think, I've said that
Right.
before. Um,
Right. Right.
I can probably write for much longer than I could do physical, demanding heart surgery.
And I don't want to wax too poetic here, but I also think it is breathing life into something, right? It's breathing life into experience. It's breathing
Yeah,
life into memories or guidance for others or the wisdom, your history, your right.
yeah,
It's offering opportunity for others who might be struggling. Not everybody is willing to live deep. Some people live on the surface their whole lives,
yeah.
and then they kind of wonder, like, where did it all go? So I don't know. It's great. It's a great outlet. I wonder, when you look back, Paul, at like the early days of your medical school career and that moment when you turned 50 and it changed, did it live up to the expectations you had, the dream that you had about what it would be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think it did. I really do. I mean, I think I've been really lucky, right? I mean, you have to. Something I had to learn how to do was step back and be more appreciative of things, right? Because I really do have so much, and it's easy to. I think for many high achievers, they focus on the next achievement and they forget about all the things that they already have, right? And it's just so easy to do that. So when I think back, I feel like I'm just lucky that I ever had a chance to do it. So I did it for like 18 years or something like that, as a staff surgeon, and 10 years, as a trainee surgeon. I'm just lucky I ever had the chance to do it. I mean, most people don't ever even get the chance to go in an open heart surgery OR and actually even just see a beating human heart in real life or put their hands on it. That experience itself is a once in a lifetime thing. I got to do the whole gamut, right?
Yeah.
And there's a really famous heart surgeon. He was the chief at Stanford, many years ago, and he had this famous statement where he said, "The toughest thing about heart surgery is getting the chance to do it." And I did get the chance, and I did it. I did it well, and now I'll do something else.
I think that's a beautiful close.
Yeah, what can we say after that, really?
What can you say after
Something goes
that?
downhill from there. So,
Once again, I'm speechless.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I
very
was
good.
going to ask you, what would you tell your younger self? But I don't know if we should go there now. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. That's a hard one. I might need to think on that one a little longer too. I'll get back to you. That will be part two.
Okay, part two. I love that. Paul, I really appreciate the time that you've given us. Uh, I'm really grateful for you sharing your career journey, for being so honest and so vulnerable. To those people who are watching, thank you for joining us in Paul's story. One, I think that's still unfolding. I think there's more
It's not
there.
over.
Yeah, Dr. Paul Fedak is not quite done yet. So if
Not yet.
if something resonated for you, if you're feeling the nudge of your own crossroads, I really hope that Paul's story makes you feel less alone. Healing isn't just something that we offer others. It's really something that we need to reclaim for ourselves as well. This is Unscripted, where truth finds its voice and physicians find their way back home to themselves. I hope to see you next time.